Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here with us. Really excited for this opportunity. As you can see, we had to start off with some excitement because whenever you have John Hogue on the program, it's always an amazing opportunity. Now, let me give you a quick rundown on today's podcast. John Hogue, the doppelganger of Nostradamus, will be sharing his predictions and outlook for 2020 and beyond. We're going to look at John's, well, hold on just real quick. This special edition of Leak Project, I'm just going to give you the rundown here. John is a best-selling author of over 12.5 books. He needs no introduction, but if you haven't heard of John before, here you go. Scholar of spirituality, and some say Nostradamus doppelganger. Tonight, we're going to be discussing some of the predictions John and Nostradamus quatrains make in reference to the timeline of 2020, who might win the elections, and will pandemics become the new normal. Mr. Hogue has been featured on hundreds of TV stations, radio programs, and podcasts from around the world, and is a regular guest on Leak Project. This podcast is brought to you in part by Noble Gold Investments. Gold recently reached a 6-year high, ladies and gentlemen. Billionaires are spending billions on gold. Many experts agree this could be a breakout year for precious metals. With the turmoil in the Middle East, concerns over the new C virus, tens of billions of dollars are quietly being pumped into the markets, and many other indicators are showing the markets are ready for a slowdown, possibly a serious correction. If you have a 401 or an IRA, do yourself a favor and call Noble Gold today. Click the links for free books and materials for Leak Project listeners. It's easier than ever to convert your 401 or IRA into gold, silver, even cryptocurrencies. Call 1-877-646-5347. That's 1-877-646-5347. How to get out of the rat race, why you need gold and silver when disaster strikes, and tricks Big Brother uses against you all the time. John, it is awesome to have you on the program. How the heck are you?
Oh my God, recovering from January, the first of 120 months of the 2020s. It was the busiest January I can ever remember. And in the forecasting business, January is usually a very, very busy time. It's the peak season. And it started off with a bang, with literally a drone strike on someone, a certain Persian who has been characterized as some big boogeyman in the press, and even on the inauguration, I mean, not the state of somebody's United Union that just ended, with Mr. T and everybody all saying that this evil fellow was destroyed, and the American leaders have a fundamental blind spot about the Middle East. And it has always been every leader's bane that of several that have been involved all the way back since FDR, that there's a certain way that the isolationist idea is projected in a hegemonic overview of the world, which is not really how people experience themselves who are the objects of our interest or our wish to destroy. And the thing that happened with this certain Persian is that it's been touted that he was somebody who killed a lot of Americans. And I can understand that that is true, but from the point of view that you're not being told is that person who was like the General Eisenhower of the Shia, the minority Muslims, was basically the man who defeated the IS people, Islamic State. He's the one that coordinated all the forces of the Shia to do most of the fighting and dying to take down one of the great candidates for Nostradamus's Antichrist, al-Baghdadi, the caliph of the pirate state of the Sunni. And this is the thing that's misunderstood. We're hearing constantly that the Shia, which the Persians are the largest body that harbor Shia in their nation, that the Shia and Persia is somehow responsible for all the terrorism in the world. Problem with that concept is that Al-Qaeda belongs to the Sunni, the majority Muslims, but Saudi Arabia's main point of, they mostly come from Saudi Arabia. In fact, the whole doctrine of Al-Qaeda and ISIS has been the idea of Wahhabism, which is in many respects not considered by even majority people of the faith there to be legitimate. And it is a very extreme version, and it is the core, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, they are not Shia. So this idea of putting it on Iran, putting it on Persia, that actually helped us in the opening stages after the attack of the two towers, actually helped us find and track down people. This certain Persian general being the one at the forefront of helping us track down Al-Qaeda in where you get your Afghans. And the other, he is the same person that in 2014, and in my Hogue Prophecy Bulletin, my epic bulletin that took me much of January to complete, which will soon be available, looks at this whole huge misrepresentation of the situation, I would say. And at the very least, if you read Hogue Prophecy, you will find at least another view, a view that tries to see what the other guy that's the target has to say about all of this. And the thing is that this man, let's see where to begin. It's such a convoluted thing, but I'll just start with this, that there was a rocket fired near Kirkuk at a coalition base, an allied coalition base in Kurdistan that is surrounded by what's left of ISIS. So one would assume that maybe there's a good chance that Katyusha rocket was fired by ISIS. But instead, and that happened on the 27th of December, but instead, 300 miles away on a front that's near the Syrian border, Kataib Hezbollah, which was one of the militias that were organized to defeat ISIS and have just about successfully done it, suddenly struck, and a whole bunch of people were killed. Now, these are Iraqi citizens of the Iraqi armed forces. As far as I know, we are supposed to be allied with the Iraqi forces. So initially, the Iraqi government was saying, "What are you doing? You're killing the people that you fought with from the air to defeat in the Battle of Mosul and these other battles in Ramallah and all these places. And so we're shooting at people that were our allies." How to code name this one? Mike from Pompeii is telling the world that the world was in imminent attack from this Persian general who was the Eisenhower of the defeat of ISIS. You never hear about it. I mean, it's just like, he coordinated all the fighting, and if it wasn't for him, ISIS literally would have taken the rest of Iraq. And the other interesting thing is, one of my readers happens to be a cleric in Iraq that during the occupation of Iraq by the United States, he was reading my blogs. And he is a very old, but very quiet cleric who rarely speaks. He's kind of the Gandhi of the Shia. Very few people know about him, but he's absolutely, when he speaks, everybody in the Shia world listens. And he made a very clear statement in 2014 when ISIS had routed 4 Iraqi divisions, and they were coming right down into Baghdad. He said, we have to rally all the Shia young men and form militias and defend our people, because ISIS views Shia as apostates. That, in fact, what they did with the prisoners, the thousands of prisoners that they caught, was summarily shoot them in mass massacres, because they don't consider them worthy of the faith. And so they were going to come down into the 2/3 of Iraq that has Shia in it, which is now currently pretty much dominating Iraq after we invaded them and changed the whole situation and took the Sunni out of power. And so this cleric, Ali Sistani, made a rare statement saying, rally all of our men and form militias and defend ourselves against this threat. And they did. It's called the PMS, the Popular Mobilization Force, PMF. And these militias, which are aided by the Persians, who are also Shia. See, this is the important thing that's not told to you in the Middle Eastern situation in our news, is that most of the tensions in the Middle East are based on sectarian allegiances. The minority Shia, the majority Sunni, and the Jews. And that this is a triangulation of sectarian tensions. And so, the faith actually spreads out beyond the borders of politics and political situations. So this group was aided by the Persians, their neighbors, because ISIS was going to hit them next. And so rather than people being called puppets or assets of Persia, these people in Iraq who form militias are no more or less assets of Persia than the Canadians who fought alongside us in World War II are American assets. You see, this is what I try to do in Hogue Prophecy, is kind of give you a more historical foundation that is not what you're usually hearing, which you should hear, so you can hear both sides and make your own decisions. But what happened is this Persian general and another general from Iraq, who I would call the Iraqi General Patton as a hero to them, formed the militias that blocked ISIS at the Baghdadi International Airport. That's where they stopped them before they went right into Baghdad. This happened in the end of June, beginning of July 2014. And then began the slow, inexorable march of these militias under these 2 men who were considered great heroes by the Shia. 200 million Shia all over the world in a sea of 1.2 billion Sunni Muslims. They were dedicated. They slowly started fighting back ISIS. They defeated them in the northwestern provinces. They finally had this huge battle in the city of Mosul, which is the 2nd largest city in Iraq, where among the 30,000 young Shia men and militias that died in this fight against ISIS, most of them died in this horrendous battle that happened longer than the Battle of Stalingrad. In fact, I call it the Arab Stalingrad. It's one of the greatest battles since World War II that almost nobody in the West knows about. A lot of our forces were involved in the air support along with Iraqi air support, but most of the fighting was done by these militias. The same militias that were bombed on the 29th of December in a rush after 2 days to hit them after a rocket was fired into a coalition base near Kirkuk, killing 1 contractor and wounding 2 Americans. But no one ever stopped to consider that there's all these these ISIS forces around that surrounded base. They just jumped on it. And of course, that immediately caused hundreds of thousands of Shia militia off duty to be very upset, and thousands of them to gather before the U.S. embassy in the Green Zone in Baghdad, starting to throw bottles and threaten the embassy. In the middle of all of this is an important point that happened back in September. Remember when the oil fields, Saudi oil fields, were struck surprisingly and mysteriously by assets, was said, of Persia and at Aramco? Well, from that point on, I came to find out that the Saudi government was trying to find a channel, a go-between, to talk to the people in Persia, the government, and see if they could make a détente. That is, to back off from all this potential of destroying all the oil assets of all sides in the Middle East, and basically taking down the civilization that we currently have on fossil fuels in one short, sudden, and terrible battle. And whoever fired those cruise missiles that were Persian missiles, they could have been their allies, they could have been direct. But the point that was made was that, one, the missiles that they paid billions of dollars for from us didn't stop the missiles from coming in. Also, it showed that these missiles were incredibly accurate, top-notch, high-end guidance systems. So that happened. That began this whole roll around of back channel negotiations. And then when this stuff happened at the end of December, which looked like another acceleration again since that time in September, the Saudis made their move. And they offered a paper to the foreign minister of Iraq, who passed it to the Prime Minister Mahdi, who is a pro-US ally, by the way. But he saw a chance to summon perhaps one of the top leaders of Persia to come and read this paper on the morning of 3rd January, and then take the contents home to his leaders and perhaps start a peace mission, a potential to back off from the destruction of the whole region. This prime minister dutifully notified us in Washington. It is said according to him, President T was really liked the idea that they were talking, and he encouraged him to continue with this Persian general coming there. So the Persian general flies in after midnight. He'll spend a few hours sleeping, and then he'll go at 8 a.m. for the meeting with the prime minister of Iraq. There's a phone call that comes up to the prime minister, and it's us saying to him, we want to inform you that we're going to shoot drone missiles at this motorcade and take this guy out. And the prime minister said, you cannot do that. I have invited him on a peace mission. You cannot assassinate this man. You are breaking our sovereign laws. He didn't get an answer from them on the phone, but a few minutes later, between 1:30 in the morning to 1:45, a drone launched several missiles that destroyed the motorcade, killing 9 people. Not only this certain Persian general that's been made the new boogeyman of the press and even on the speech tonight, but also, so they killed the Eisenhower of the Shia, and they killed the Patton who came to meet him and his entourage. So we're not at war with this Persian. We killed generals that helped us win the war against ISIS. And erupted a storm across the Middle East. Millions of upset, angry Shias, because you see, this is where America doesn't get it. The Shias, if you go back to the 7th century, the Shia have always been this minority that suffers a victim martyr complex because they're often persecuted. Many of the great holy cities of the Shia are built over the bones and blood of their martyred leaders, who they still worship like saints, but they're considered apostates by the Sunni, the majority, because they believe that Ali, one of the first caliphs, popes of the Ummah of Islam, was a direct descendant of Muhammad. So the Sunni believe that bloodlines is something idolatrous, and that's not really should be part of it. So this is a dispute that has caused wars between the two since the 7th century. But what happens often is that if you attack the heroes, like these are the new saints that they just took out, on the grounds that this person was going to cause some attack on embassies in the around the region, our embassies. But as the days drew on, that story kept changing. At one point, the President T said, we're absolutely certain. 2 days later, when there's 15 million Shia in Iraq and Persia crowding, I have the pictures in these articles that I'm going to send out, that there are millions. There was as many as 7 million mourners in the city of Tehran alone, and over 1 million in Baghdad. Oceans of people with pictures of the 2 slaughtered generals. If this was supposed to save American lives, it started a black sea of mourning and firestorm that we might have moved on to the next entertainment. People of the Shia world have not. And it could significantly alter the situation of the future. For one thing, the Iraqi parliament said, we want you Americans out. And now there's hundreds of thousands of militia who are sending pot shots of rockets at our bases since this happened. But more than that, the thing that started this thing really going was that the Iranians said, look, we will have our official mourning and then we'll act. We will respond to this outrage. You see, this man had diplomatic papers. This man was, that would be like, I mean, it is barbarous what we did in organized law. And then as the situation unraveled for the reasons, because no attack happened. And if you understand the organization that this general commanded, the elite Praetorian Guard of Persia, that he's been marked since 1999, since he became this coordinator of attacks and things. He's known he's going to be killed ever since he got the job. So in the classic Shia fashion, everybody's already ready to take his place. So if you're going to take a leader out to stop something from happening, it's not how you would stop it, because the other guy will step right in and go ahead and do it. So it just shows the ignorance of powerful people in our country who just don't get the Middle East and make these prodigious decisions, which have unintended consequences. So what happened is, and of course he was immediately taken over, and it's important, I want to say, in a sense of Nostradamus, and what he said about this whole Persian conflict in his many prophecies about it, that the man who took over from this general, he might actually be indirectly named in a battle in our near future. But hold that thought. I'm just going to move a little deeper into this and tell you that as even the mainstream news had to remark at the amazing sight of probably some of the biggest gatherings of human beings in the last 20 years, all in black or in white funerary shrouds, all coming to bury these two heroes. And the heroes, as they call them, Iraqi and Iran, were both draped and honored in both countries as their coffins were moved around. Now, as this came on, more and more, this story about imminent danger of this Persian general got unraveled. Suddenly, it was stated that, the president said, well, actually, I believed that there was a threat against our embassies. I thought that might be what happened. So he's backing off from saying, we got him. It's definitely, we have the intelligence. And then his Secretary of Defense said, I actually never saw any intelligence about this Persian general about to strike American embassies. He was actually cornered, and on TV said that. And then a few days later comes Mike from Pompeii, ponderously coming onto the screen, and he talks about a new form of deterrence. Long story short, Mike Pompeii almost sounded like, and I write about it with a bit of tongue in cheek, he almost looked like Tony Soprano. In this, he's basically saying that we reserve the right now, whether we're at war or anybody or not, if we don't like the policies, to assassinate leaders. This Persian general was the second most powerful man in Persia. And, it'd be like taking out the vice president or taking out Secretary of State. Nobody would tolerate that. But this is what they did. And now we have Mike of Pompeii talking about it as our new policy to have deterrence against people. We reserve the right to strike leaders of people. And some people started to muse, does that mean that the foreign minister of Russia, if he goes somewhere to do something, there may be a strike from a drone? Or if the Chinese foreign minister goes somewhere, that maybe if we don't like who he's talking to, he'll be struck by a drone. This is the very definition of a terrorist state act, of state terrorism. So this is how it's viewed by the other side. And when the morning finished, that night, missiles were launched. The first time in all of this long and difficult period of tensions between modern day Persia and us. It happened on the 8th of January, our time. I was thinking, my God, the missiles are flying. Almost here, the missiles are flying, hallelujah, from the dead zone or something. This is a situation that I've always been very concerned about. All the time that I've been a prophecy scholar and studier of this, but also, especially in the last 13 years, when we have been directly trying, it seems, different administrations, but trying to pull Iran into a full-scale war. And the problem with this situation is how quickly it might go out of control. If one side takes revenge by killing some of us after killing their peace-errant fellow, that's what I was wondering the few minutes after these missiles launched. And the Persians made it very clear as they launched them, we've launched them. They are from us, and they're heading into Iraq to hit American targets. So I was going through this feeling of, oh my goodness, this is it. This could potentially be the tit for tat thing that in so many prophetic traditions, which I've been talking about on your show and others, leads to a sudden escalation where without people planning it, you've dragged China and Russia into a direct collision with the United States, and we're all nuclear powers.
So let me jump in then with what's going on in the Middle East, and with the Nostradamus quatrains and the predictions that he made. Were there some parallels to what's going on right now?
Yes. And it's the thing, I will say it now, is that I had kind of an epiphany when I saw who took over from this man, who is this boogeyman that was assassinated with one of our allied generals. He has been taken over by a man named Ismail Ghani. He's a general. Ismail Ghani. Ishmael is the Persian pronunciation for Ishmael, the Arabic origin. There are prophecies, some of the most chilling prophecies of Nostradamus, that point to an attack, a naval attack coming out of Carmania, which in 16th century was the Persian coast to the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is that very narrow passage where 20% of all the oil of the world is imported and exported out of tankers coming out of the Persian Gulf. It's just a little bottleneck where the Persian Gulf, all the oil goes out there. And so it alludes to the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, which has been considered one of the main counteractions potentially, if the Persians are directly attacked by us, that they'll shut down the oil industry. They cannot defeat us by force, but they can certainly take down the world economy. And if push comes to shove, and what they were trying to hint to the Emirates and the Saudis, that if Persia is attacked and their oil fields are attacked, the Persians have thousands of cruise missiles now that are top dollar, top drawer. They seem to be actually more accurate than ours, our Tomahawks and things like that. And they will strike with great precision, which brings me back. I will get back to this important thing with Ishmael. It brings me back to what happened. The Persians made it very clear that they didn't want to kill any of us, but they did make a very strong message when all these missiles, which I show the actual satellite pictures, the surgical strikes, the fact that they took out hangars where all the drones that killed their man were launched, that they took out the domicile where the 30 drone pilots would sleep at night, knowing full well that they would be very busy trying to launch drones out of harm's way as the missiles were coming, because they were alerted to the missiles coming by the Iraqi government at 11 p.m. that night. At around 1:30 to 1:45, the first of 4 waves of 32 Fateh 313 supersonic cruise missiles hit. They hit around Al-Assad Air Base, which is up farther north in Anbar province, where there's a very large contingent of U.S. drone bases there and helicopters, and a few hit near Erbil, which is the capital of Kurdistan, Iraq. So they came right over the border, which is quite quickly and easy to do because the Iranian border is the longest border Iraq has. And so what happened, first it was told by the Secretary of Defense that not a lot happened. It was really light damage, and okay, they made their gesture. And even, fortunately, I went to bed thinking, well, we're not going to end the world overnight tonight, because the President T said, well, so far so good, which I read to mean that what had happened, what damage had done, was definitely attempting not to harm anybody, but to show that they could do it. And the fact that these bases were completely exposed to attack and had no ability to knock any of these missiles down. I call it in my writings the rhetorical strike. The Persians are famous for being rhetorical in what they do. They kind of say, this is what could happen if you kill one of our leaders again, is what the message was. And I think Mr. T kind of got that, because even though he said it looks like the Persians are backing off and that's really good, and now we're kind of backing away from that, the message that was really sent was, if this goes to blows, we can launch on all your bases all across the Middle East with weapons that are perhaps even a little better than your Tomahawk missiles. And that also told the Saudis and the Emiratis that, and we're not going to strike the Americans and seek to kill them, but we'll take your oil industry out. And that's the other way that the Persians could fight back, by destroying the economies of the two nations that buy most of the military industrial complex's weapons. So not only do you upend the petrodollar by completely putting into chaos the petrochemical world that everybody needs to function as a civilization, but you also take away one of the major industries that, if you destroy, completely bomb back to the Stone Age, Saudi oil fields and Emirati oil fields to the point where they can't buy anything, and you've got years before they can even afford to pump oil, let alone buy hundreds of billions of dollars of weapons. The message was sent that don't mess with us. And it also sends a message that the Saudis, I'm thinking, are still trying to talk to the Persians and try to settle a détente, a deal outside of the Americans. That's the other important thing that happened here. This strike on that peace mission was us telling the Persians and the Saudis and Emiratis, don't deal without us involved. They literally will kill your peace offering movement. Hit it right where it hurts. So that was also a message that was sent that you will not hear on the mainstream news, which is bought and sold by the military industrial complex and the oil industries. So the thing is, it gets me back now to the thing that's very chilling, that now this great hero of the Persians and the Iraqis is gone. And he's replaced by a man named Ismail Ghani. The people that are coming out in their fleets to attack the fleet of the True Serpent, which symbolizes the Navy Jack of the U.S. Navy. It's a rattlesnake on the flag that they all fly, and the Fifth Fleet there with the 13 red and yellow stripes, and it says, don't tread on me. It's a revolutionary American flag. Flies on all the battleships and battle fleets of the Fifth Fleet in the Persian Gulf and any of the others that come in. This is the True Serpent that melts and sinks a fleet of the Ishmaelites, those who support and are commanded by Ismail. So it could very well be Nostradamus has named the commander who succeeded the death of the other one by missile drone, who's going to actually be commanding Persian forces in a potential near future war with the United States that could unhinge the Middle East, upend the ability to fuel the civilization, and ultimately drag in Russia and China and America into the conflagration that so many prophetic different views seems to see is the match point of the Middle East with Persia. So that is first of many things that happened in January that could really change our future. And though we have backed off, this is now the third time that we almost went to this scenario, into this escalation, this guns of August 1914. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on this because, certainly you have a lot to say, and this podcast has gone in a much different direction than I was expecting, but we'll certainly get into some of the predictions and such. And you usually, that's kind of how you roll, man. You are a rogue warrior. So I get it. And I'm wondering, because there's usually two sides to a story, right? There's always two sides, and we're not getting all the information. I mean, unless we're actually in there with our hands in the dirt, seeing what's going on, we don't really know except for what we're being told. Now, you might have sources that are pretty close, or maybe even on the inside. So
they are on the inside.
Okay, well, let's talk about that then. Do you ever wonder if they're giving you information that could be false, or do you ever wonder if they're playing you on the stage because you have a huge audience? You've got people from around the world that watch you, so maybe they're giving you bits and pieces of information that fit their agenda more. I'm just asking you this.
No, it's a good question, and it's a very important question because of exactly the kind of cultural issues that the Persians do is to be mindful of what message are they trying to say. What are they trying to take a message with a strike to make somebody else aware of what they really intend to do? Now, I do deal with all of that. I don't only deal with it with them, but also with the American leaders and the Western leaders. My position is that I do not support either side in whatever their agenda is. What has made me over the years, and I can only say for those of you, if you want to find out, just read the 1,200 articles that I have placed at HogueProphecy.com since 1999, documented, because of course, how do I defend what I say? I have to defend it by my accuracy. And so I have to give some objective proof to the subjective qualities of making forecasts. And so the way I've done that is that people can go into my archives, they're free, and you can look at all the things I've said over the last 20 years. You can also look at all of my 59 books that have been published and dated and date tagged and see my accuracy. It's about 80%. So my argument in support of this is that I contend that I'm able to look into and have sources in all sides, and I have all sides reading me, by the way. Like I said, Ali Sistani, the Iraqis read me, ISIS reads me, Al-Qaeda reads me, CIA reads me, NSA reads me, MI6 reads me. I'm kind of out there being read by everybody. And in a strange way, I have to be very careful, because in a situation like this, where all sides of a conflict are reading what I'm having to say because they recognize that I'm accurate, it's an interesting responsibility. The main thing that what I'm doing in this moment for all of your watchers is doing exactly what I think your question was asking, is giving people in this side of the world a whole different take on what happened this January. We all clearly hear what the narrative here is on this side of the argument, but my side is to give you the other side. And that's all I'm doing. I'm not supporting it, but I think if we're going to survive, people need to have information. And I will just say, and the point here in closing is that one of the most important dangers of that the prophets I've looked at looking at world wars say about the third potential world war is that we stumble into it with complete misinformation. And we think we're doing good, but we may actually push the button in a situation that didn't have to happen. And when I see the way the journalism has gone down the toilet, where everything is where people's views about other cultures are completely skewered in this country, that is exactly what these prophets were warning us we should not do. So I am trying, my service to humanity is to give all sides the thing they're missing from the other side. And I do it. I mean, I will defend. I mean, when the Democrats were in power, I was pointing out all the things that were wrong with that. And then when now the others are in power, I do the same. So I'm always kind of trying to counterbalance whatever people are saying and doing out there so that you get fully informed.
Well, and John, I will say, when I heard you talk about journalism, the majority of what we see, over 90% of what people watch on TV, is controlled by 5 corporations now. It used to be 6, now it's 5. So it's not journalism. It is more of it's a repeating. Oh, here's my script. Okay, my superiors want me to talk about this today because it's going to fit the agenda for these sponsors. However, John, and I think you're great, man. I consider you a friend. But it does kind of seem like you're being more one-sided on this conversation, and
Yes.
That's just kind of how it's coming across. And
that's right. And so, I'll tell you why. No, I'll tell you why. My intensity is a good question. My intensity about putting this out is in direct response to that propagandistic one-sided story. It's almost like I feel a passion to say, here's the other side. I don't want to live in Persia. I am not interested in even these religions. That's not the point. But it's good to bring this out, is that I am being strong because the noise of cuddly, manipulated, Walt Disney-fied stuff that people are hearing about the world, I feel I have to shout. And that's at least why it sounds. And the danger is people who are in a binary point of view can think, oh, he's now not 1 with us, he's a 0. And what I'm trying to say is there's a point the zeros are trying to say that the ones should listen to, at least consider, before they launch a war and blow up the world.
And let me jump in on that, man. Your passion, that's one of the things I love about you. And if you're giving me your truth and your passion, that's, in my opinion, the best you can have a conversation with somebody. That's the best time you can have, is when you're getting, because you're going to talk to different people like that have different opinions and different viewpoints and different truths. There's more than 2 sides. I mean, I know people that live in Israel. I know people that live in Pakistan. I know people that live in Amsterdam, all over the world. And I get their viewpoints. Literally, I talk to people off the air, and I wouldn't be surprised if all those wonderful agencies watch Leak Project also. Hey guys, gals, love you. I know when I check my phone sometimes to see where it gets routed through, at least when I had a different carrier, I would look at the IP address and it would get routed through the Department of Defense in Columbus, Ohio, or the United Kingdom. Yep. Very bizarre. It's like, why is my phone? But anyway, so
that's the Atlantic Council. That's probably the Atlantic Council that's doing that in Europe.
Yeah. Hey guys.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So yeah, I mean, and so, it's just like, I want to tell a short story about what happened when all this initially happened. I was telling a friend at our produce department down in a little village of Langley here. And I was talking about some stuff, and there's another guy who's really great who works there, and he had a different view from what I was telling this young man who asked me. I don't I don't go and start talking about these things. I'm invited, like on your show. If people ask me a question and then I respond. Otherwise, I'm not like going up to people and say, "Do you know what happened?" So basically, and this young man was asking questions, and he was listening. He first listened to me, and I was trying to say what I was saying to all of you. And then I overheard him as I was looking at broccoli. I overheard the guy come up and say to him, "Well, this man really killed a lot of Americans. He killed about 400 Americans, this Persian general. And, he was real evil and bad, and he killed all these Americans in Iraq." And then, of course, the guy comes up to me, a young man, and says, well, yeah, he said that. Well, and I said to him, he's right. He's our friend over there is absolutely right. This general killed a lot of Americans in Iraq. In fact, even tonight at Mr. T's big speech, was a big point made with the survivors of a family that died of an IED explosive that was made in Persia, talked about how this man killed them. Now, here's what I try to do in my service to humanity is say this. Are you aware that those Americans, from the view of those who killed them, were invaders? It's like what happened when in the American Revolution. You could say, oh, we got to kill George Washington because he killed a lot of redcoats and made orphans of these people. And then the parliament could have had them in the upper wings get up and say, look, he murdered our heroes, our redcoats, and we're trying to preserve our power there. So you see, it's a different perception. This man did help the Shia militias in southern Iraq resist an invasion from invaders who invaded their country, killed 1 million of their people, fought battles with depleted uranium, which have left certain cities in Iraq so irradiated that the birth defects actually exceed the number you see in Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the atomic bombs were launched. So the country was destroyed. Now, whether one likes Saddam Hussein or not, and I certainly don't, there are realities that are beyond the passions of political differences or differences in styles of governing, whether it's totalitarian or democratic, that simply say, if you invade a country and you were not invited and you just go in and take a wrecking ball to stuff, it's bound to happen that patriots, just like we didn't like the redcoats coming in Concord and Lexington, where they have their own view of Concord and Lexington. They have their own Minutemen. And like the French armed our Minutemen to defeat the redcoats, the Persians armed their fellow Shias with IEDs to defeat the invaders that we don't consider bad, but we're not the ones being invaded. And so that is why this man helped those people, just like a French general would help American fighters of redcoats kill them. And that's just an aspect, that's the bigger picture of the situation. I mean, if we had never invaded Iraq in 2003, one could then say, would we have all of these things falling into place that are so dangerous to the future if we did not invade Iraq on the rush to judgment that there were weapons of mass destruction there, which cannot yet be proven to have been there. And so there you have it. This is, and the other thing too is the consequence of taking out Saddam Hussein's social system and the Sunni minority that was running Iraq, beyond whether it was the right thing or wrong thing to do. If you take out the social services in the government and disband the army, you've effectively taken down the society, and then it went into 8 years of chaos. sectarian violence that didn't happen before happened because this is what we did. We created a democracy where everybody had their purple thumb, but we never considered what would happen if a country with three major ethnic groups, which the Ottoman Empire for 600 years understood never to put in one nation. They were three: Kurds, Shia, and Sunni, were different provinces. We decided to put them all into one country that we kind of created in 1917 and 18 after World War I, thinking that nationalism actually works in the Arab culture, when in fact tribalism does. I'm almost done. And so we go in and we basically hand the Shia majority the power to make government through voting, and we literally hand Iraq to the Persians. We did that. Bad thinking, bad misinformed strategic thinking is getting a lot of our boys and girls killed and hurt. That's so I'm, and being called invaders when they should be liberators.
Well, and let me jump in on this, because I definitely hear what you're saying. And there's, if you go into a country and you dismantle its military, like you said, you're setting the country up for a lot of problems. And let me talk for a minute, please, because I don't see it as you're saying us and we, and we didn't do this. I mean, this is clearly at the very top levels. You've got people that are working out deals to maximize money and inventory and elements and minerals and everything else. And then they get the military and good people, good men and women from both sides. But, I've been thinking about this. I'm going to go deep for a minute, John, because everything about matter, man. I'm a very spiritual person. And if I get a little bit emotional here, it's because I don't like seeing people on either side suffer, and one person should not have to suffer in war. And I used to watch like these Vietnam clips, or when I was younger, there was the Gulf War that was going on in Iraq, and I was in my early 20s when George Bush got elected, and I'm seeing these people go to war, and I've got family that fought, and when people are going to war, they're just kids, but I'm looking at it then, and they look like they're adults. They look older, but now, I'm 40 and I'm 42, and I'm looking at these kids, they're going to war, and it's so sad. You got 20-year-olds, 19-year-olds. I mean, are you serious? They're kids. And first of all, there's wonderful people on all sides. I mean, so I'm thinking to myself, what's the solution? What do we do here? Because they look at us as the enemy. They look at us as the devil. And then we've got people on our side that look at them as the devil. Yep. So matter, this physical existence, this physical consciousness, whatever happened, if we were once light beings, I mean, I don't know, man. I had a wonderful talk with William Henry describing these civilizations at one point that might have actually had portals, like these star portals that could have made you a light being. And if we're light beings, we don't need physical matter, right? So look at people now. They're thinking, okay, I got to support my family. I've got to have resources. I got to have food, water, shelter. And then you've got these militaries and governments that are trying to get positions. And I do my best to look at all sides and I get in somebody's head. I do a pretty good job of getting in somebody's head if I want to, just to see where they're coming from. And a lot of people don't know any better, man. Their conscience just doesn't know any better. And you got people that go out to war and they come back and they're like, when they're going to war, they think they're going on their honeymoon. And then they come back and they're like, they think they're going to go to hell. So what's the solution? Because there's some really dark people on the side that you're talking about as well, on all sides. So what's the solution, man?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I often write about there are war hawks in the Al-Quds, in the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, that believe their job over there in Persia is to start the Islamic version of the apocalypse. So, and then you have people in our government, including the Secretary of State, who is a dominionist, who is very much believing that Scripture has dictated America to fight in Armageddon. So on both sides, there is definitely, I just want to be fair, that there's on both sides, there's this group of people, but there's one word that I can offer as the spark, the core of the issue of, like, as you're saying, all the things, people needing, we have our needs, we have resources. We're not in a being of light space. We are struggling to try to make things happen here, and there's bad people on both sides. That's all true. And the situation, the issue that is literally one word, that is the issue between whether a human race has a future or not, because of this strain, is the word identity. Identity is what causes beings of light, I would propose, to forget that they were the beings. Put it this way. Once upon a time, we were beings of light who decided to play a game of forgetting we were beings of life, and decided to be identified in dense matter. And because we were beings of light, we played this game beautifully, perfectly, so perfectly that we forgot that we were beings of light, and we forgot it was a game of identity. And that, in a simple sutra, is what is the dilemma of all consciousness in life. Because, as my teacher Osho used to say, and I tend to believe it's atomically a fundamental fact of looking at things, in my experience, is that there's only one evil in the world: identified unconsciousness. Where we're identified with these things we're borrowing when we're born. Like, if you were born in Persia, you would have a whole different set of identity trips and stuff. You're born in America, it's different. And wherever you're born, different situations. And so much of that is just programmed into us when we come into this world out of light. And then suddenly we find ourselves trapped by identities that we're not even aware are not our own, that have actually been put into us. I mean, this is something I so often deal with in my private online readings, with the issue of identity. When I start a 55-minute reading online, I first look at the astrology, the body mind Kelly Blue Book of the person that I'm reading, to get a feeling what the strengths and weaknesses of the vehicle, that's the body mind of this being of light who's driving it. And then, after that's quickly defined, we go deeper into trying to recognize and uncover the buried being of light that has been, and try to gain with some help. And usually after the reading, I give some tools of awareness and meditation that can help people rediscover their lost innocence, the thing that they had when at birth, that every society, whether you're born in Persia, America, anywhere, for all good intentions, ends up making us these people of identity that fight over preserving our identities, which are not even ours, and unto the destruction of the civilization. And so that is why I start off by trying to show other sides, but my work, for those who read it, always goes to this issue that we're talking about here. What is the fundamental issue? What have we lost? What game did we play, or what game were we told to play by people who'd already lost their memory of being beings of light and then forgot it was a game? They teach us the same game. It's the game of identity. And what I have found that's helped me step back and see how I was turned into one of these robots of identity is the art of self-observation that leads to an understanding of a no self that observes the self. And when that is beginning to be engaged, then you start seeing, you have an inner standing to what it begins to kind of disconnect you from your identities. And then you can start seeing, not only when you start seeing your own issues with identity, it's not very deep before you start seeing that we're all into this mess together. And then the whole thing that makes identity make us fight with each other, you then understand that the person you want to fight with or is fighting with you is equally trapped in this identity. Only the difference is that you're becoming awake of it, that there is the being of light still in there, and it's in him or the other too. And then suddenly it changes the way you just can't get into the identity issue. It's like, and then you begin to have a compassion where you start to understand. It doesn't mean I support what the Persians do, but I do contend that I understand why they're doing it, and the identity constructs that are propelling them to do things unconsciously that clash with our equally unconscious way of dealing with things concerning them. And that, yeah, and that is the thing that if people can see that more and more, then we have a chance, one individual at a time, to bring the being of light into this world of identity and live it by example. And like candles that have unlit wicks, the hypothesis is get close to this being of light, your candle will become equally a being of light, because we are all equally unique.
I like that. Absolutely. Now we're talking. And let's focus on some other topics now, if we could. Okay. There's, I want to get into what your take is on the elections, who you think is going to be elected for 2020, and then I want to talk about the pandemics that seem to be main. Like that's all that's in the news right now. Yep. So Bigfoot could be out there, an alien could land on the White House lawn, and guess what? Nobody would care because they're going to be worried about the C virus. Yeah. And it's okay. So I got to tell you, this is very interesting because you look at the logo of this Wuhan facility. Now, this could be photoshopped. I mean, I haven't double confirmed this yet, but the logo looks like the Umbrella Corporation, but different colors from Resident Evil. Dude, Resident Evil, man. Remember that? The T virus that was supposed to heal cancer, but then it turned everybody into flesh-eating zombies. Hello, now that's some entertainment. Yeah. So this is fascinating, but here's what I see, dude. I think that this is being pushed into the media, and I think there's multiple exercises and multiple reasons for it. But I don't think it's going to turn into this global pandemic that's going to take out 2% of the population. I certainly hope not. I'm being optimistic about this. Now, I'm keeping track of the numbers they're showing us, and the numbers they could be way off, but at least according to the numbers they're giving us, it's about a 2% mortality rate. Another article just came out. Oh, now it's the avian flu again out there. So the avian flu combined with the corona have a Lyme without a Lyme, and then there might be a Smurf flu coming up. I've heard about the Smurf flu. That's really something you got to be worried about, folks, is the Smurf flu, because it turns your skin blue and it gives you this like white hat you can't take off your head. It's very bizarre. And anyway, I could go even further on the Smurf flu, but I'm not going.
Well, scary. If I ever became Smurfed, I would just wear Hindi makeup and say I'm Krishna.
Hello. Yeah.
Hello.
Perfect.
So, awesome. Because yellow, he wears yellow sarongs and stuff, so the hat would fit perfectly.
It would.
The 2020s, it's going to be a whole chapter in my book, The Roaring 2020s, which I'm working on, try to get out this year. I do feel that we're due for some major swine flu. Bird flu is also a mutation of swine flu from 1918. And I'm actually more concerned about the aviary flu that's broken out in certain chicken factories in about 150 to 200 miles from Wuhan. But they are slaughtering them by the tens of thousands to stop it from happening. But the thing, again, it's often the case when I look at the news, the news is so into sensation to get ratings that certain things are not, from my sources in China, other places, are not being stated. And that is that a lot of the people who are sick with this are not being recorded. And I think that probably the actual sickness rate to death is much lower, because actually a lot more people have gotten it. This is acting more like a normal flu in that it's highly contagious, but the recovery, a lot of people, what you're not hearing out of China, which is happening, is that thousands and thousands of people have recovered from it quickly. It, like a flu, had a bad week, they're back. So it's because it's more contagious than SARS, which is a crown. That's what the term C means in Latin, is a crown. This crown virus has several cousins. And this one is actually less deadly and more like a normal flu. The other thing too is that, once again, like, we've had 15 million people catch the flu in the United States in this early stage of the flu season. And the flu on average kills 20,000 or more people a year. So the thing that I'm always looking out for is watching for mutations of avian or swine related viruses, to the point that now almost half the people who contact the bird flu die, but they do so because a lot of them are people who fight with cocks in battles in Asia, and cockfights. And when their cocks are wounded, they suck the blood to heal them. So they get direct, by eating or by preparing before cooking, they get direct contact with the blood that causes them to be sick. And usually about half of them, third to half, die. But that's a very hard thing to get. My concern is always, when does it do what bubonic plague did, or the swine flu, where it goes into an aerosol stage, where it mutates again after being passed to the human being into a situation where a cough or a sneeze it's no longer direct contact with body fluids, but it's a direct contact through aerosols in the air from coughing and sneezing. All the great pandemics make that step. None of these scares that we've had with bird flu, swine flu, well, except in 1918, have gone to that point. But the thing I've often written about is that the whole meat industry that has these huge concentration camps where animals are literally in their own Auschwitz situation, where they're living in their own filth and stuff, which is unnatural to the animals. And they're being pumped full of antibiotics so that they stay healthy enough to be slaughtered. But in the process, this is lowering their immune systems, and to a point where we're literally creating factories, especially in China, where there's so much of that going on, that it's just bringing the possibility of a mutation into another swine or bird flu outbreak. That it's got me concerned because of what Nostradamus talks about, a future plague of blood, which is what an avian flu and a swine flu is, a blood plague that then transmutes and mutates into a sneeze or a cough vector to other people. So he talks about blood plague, and back in the 80s, I thought that he was talking about AIDS. And then when I saw Ebola happening, I thought maybe something like Ebola, which is a blood-to-blood, highly contagious, was it. But I'm thinking more now that he literally is meaning this is the famous 16th century plague doctor who fought the bubonic plague almost single-handedly for 270 days when all the other doctors died in Aix-en-Provence, which is the capital of Provence in South France. He has an amazing narrative about his experience. They had an understanding. I was surprised to see how much people then had an understanding, not the last step, but they understood that if you were clean, you were more protected. If you drank fresh water rather than polluted water, you were more protected. If for some reason, no one knew why rats were always around when plague was at its worst, so they just killed the rats. That even goes back into biblical commentaries about plague. They killed the rats. They didn't understand that the rats were not the factor. They were carrying the fleas. People in Nostradamus's time, even back to the 1st century BC, had theorems about that maybe there was something that we call germs, a very small thing that passes and makes people sick. So a lot of the things that we thought were discovered by us were sometimes thousands of years ago considered. Even 3,000 years ago, the Hindus and the rishis were talking about atomic particles. So as I immersed myself into a study of Nostradamus to try to know what he knew and get a concept of what he was open to and biased against, I discovered that actually a lot of the doctors were on to the right answer. They just knew that filth, the foul humors of bad swamps and things like that, they didn't know that there were mosquitoes coming out of that foul swamp that actually caused people to be sick with malaria, which carried off his first family, Nostradamus. But, he was already complaining the year before in Agen, France. Him and Scaliger, his mentor, were saying, if you don't clean and drain those swamps, we're going to leave. And of course, in those days, having smart men of the Renaissance was like having soccer heroes or something. So they said, okay. The city father said, we'll drain it. But in the following spring, I think Nostradamus's family caught malaria, and his young wife and 2 baby children died because it was a pestilence he didn't know how to fight. And it's a pestilence that clean water and good hygiene, which seemed radical in his time, but actually it goes back to the classical. Galen and Hippocrates all talked about fresh water, cleanliness, next to the divine, the right kind of foods to eat, and trying to help your 4 humors bring balance back to your body, your choleric, your earth, your water, your fire, and your air elements in your body. And so he had a great sense of, and one of the most amazing prophecies he ever made was in century 27, century 1 of quatrain verse 27, 4-line quatrain, where he said, the thing long ago forgotten, the secret, shall be rediscovered by Pasteur. This will take place during when the current great lunar cycle comes to its end. But by rumors as foul as passing wind, he shall be dishonored. Now, translating that, there's only 2 times in Nostradamus that the term for shepherd in Latin, pastor, is mentioned. The second time is the pastor of Rome. So that's the shepherd of Rome, the Pope, the Bishop of Rome. But in this, he has a very interesting word code, an astrological code, a grand lunar cycle coming to its completion that was currently happening in his lifetime was the one that started in 1535 when he was a young man. And so I looked for when it would end. It would end in 1889. So I thought, I have a potential objective lead here. I have a date. Is there something happening in 1889 that's significant to a man named Pasteur who might have who discovered some kind of thing that had been forgotten? Well, yes, 1889, Louis Pasteur he was the man who discovered germs, discovered how to kill them, pasteurizing milk and foods and things. He was the huge hygiene breakthrough and discovered that germs created diseases. And Louis Pasteur, who created this in 1889, created the Institut Pasteur that created further study into germs in Paris. So that happened in 1889 at the end of that lunar cycle. What else does the verse say? There was another line I forgot to tell you. It says he will be considered a semi-godlike figure, a demi-homme. And in the Encyclopedia Britannica of 1889, he is called the Demiurge, the half-god figure. That was his nickname. They called Louis Pasteur that in 1889. Now, the final line, that through rumors, like his reputation is assaulted, as foul as passing wind, is literally what he's saying, is farting. It so happens that in 1995, as often happens in these prophecies when you're onto something, some of the lines don't get fulfilled even near the time things happen, like a century later. And the final line was fulfilled in 1995 when an author looked at had got rights to look at all of Louis Pasteur's notes, and discovered by studying all of them that what he said about experimenting with animals before experimenting with children was a lie. He actually only experimented on street urchins and street children living off the streets. So he was a little bit of a Dr. Mengele in the way that he found these wonderful discoveries. And that whether that's true or not, it is a great shadow, as foul as farting, Nostradamus said, because you can see Nostradamus was upset by that being stated. So we're talking about a prophet that's probably more sensitive towards pestilences from personal tragedy, and also from personal triumph, as a man who helped heal and save 3 cities from plague in his time. So he talks about a great pestilence coming in our future. He talks about it actually encompassing the entire northern hemisphere. When there's a object called Samorobrin flying at 270 miles above the northern hemisphere. Now, Samo in Russian means self-operating. Obira, Samo is self-operating. It's also a seed pod that, like a maple seed pod. If you ever seen them, they have wings, so they flutter down from the tree. And that would have been a tree that was around where Nostradamus lived. And actually, if you look at one of these pods, it looks just like the ISS station's solar panels. It looks like it's like a spaceship. It's a ball with solar panels. And so, a 16th century man doesn't know what we know. So he will describe things in nature. He'll talk about great beasts swallowing across the rivers, making great storm and tumult. Well, those are tanks coming through the rivers, because he's talking about the armies of the world would be set Hister. He surround Hister. This is Hitler. And in his fortress, he would die, and no one would know exactly what happened to him, as he was in a bunker made of steel, a cage of iron. And when you consider that he called his defensive ring around Europe Festung Europa, Fortress Europe, when he was losing the war in 43 and 44, and he talked about great battles across the rivers, the great rivers, and of course, the Dnieper River in Russia, the Elbe in Battle of Berlin, the Battle of the Rhine, the crossing the Seine. I mean, rivers were major points of fighting in World War II. So we have this plague, and he often has a litany that he talks about: iron of war, weapons, famine, plague, and then a renewal. There's a theme, there's a sequence. I call it the apocalyptic sequence, which in one of my earlier books I brought out and showed how he might change the words, but they run around the same themes: war, pestilence, drought, plague, renewal. And they often happen in the final line of about 7 quatrains scattered in 4-line verses scattered all over the prophecies. But if you bring them all together, they are pieces of a larger puzzle. And so I really have a sense, I would just say about our C virus is that I don't think it's going to be the thing to be worried about. I mean, certainly compared to, even though it's highly contagious, and you got to also understand that in China, I mean, I had an experience of what it's like to live in such pollution when for 3 summers, the fire fogs came down into this, one of the freshest air areas of America where I live in the Pacific Northwest. And we were getting parts per million readings outside my window that were higher, well, as high as Beijing and New Delhi. And I can tell you from living in the developing world or in India or these places where your body's constantly being assaulted by different kinds of hygiene problems or bad air, that it's not surprising to me that the death rate is higher in China. And the more danger is that if this virus passes into other developing nations that are crowded and full of pollution and bad hygiene, then certainly the death tolls will be higher in those countries. But I don't think America needs to worry that much about this virus. I am more concerned whenever there's outbreaks in chickens or swine of something. And that unfortunately has just happened. As my next wave of articles, I'm going to put the C virus back and look more at that and drum up all the things I've said over the last 20 years, quote them from all sources and dates about how I've been on to this danger.
You know, John, I remember back in 2009 when the WHO declared the swine flu a pandemic, and the media was just, I mean, if you turned on the news, that's what they were talking about. And they're like, but don't worry, folks. We've got something to protect you. Take this vaccine. It's wonderful. You'll love it. And people are like, oh, okay. We're okay now. But I just am seeing so many similarities. And a lot of, I've talked to very intelligent people, much smarter than myself, that are, PhDs describing the genome sequence and how it's making them very nervous because it is the unknown. And I get it. Hey, but you know what? It's just been played so many times in the past. This card's been played so many times in the past. I'm not going to get freaked out about it anymore. Because I remember asking questions back in 2009, even when I worked with people from around the world. I lived in the Northwest at the time, not far from you, actually. And I worked for a Fortune 100 company, and I was around lots of people. And my friend George from Moldova, he was in the Soviet military. He did training in the really cold place out there, Siberia. He did training in Siberia, and when you look at him, you just like, okay, he looks like he looks tough, but he doesn't look like somebody that could take on a mixed martial artist. And he could, man. But he was super respectful, very nice guy. He'd give you the shoes off of his feet if you needed him more than he did, and he wouldn't ask any questions. He'd help you out. But anyway, I haven't talked to him in years. I hope he's doing good. But we were talking about the swine flu. And I knew he grew up in Moldova and spent a lot of time in the Soviet Union and the communism and such. So I'm like, I'm watching all this stuff on the media, George, and they're talking about how bad this is and how people need to protect themselves, yet everything still seems to be normal with businesses and public transportation, and schools are open and flights are going. So I'm thinking to myself, this just isn't adding up. And I'm like, what would the Soviet Union do in a circumstance like this if this was a pandemic? He said they just shut everything down for a couple of weeks and then they'd go back and do their thing. And I'm thinking to myself, if something's that bad, why in the world would they be allowing flights at all? Why would they allow school, anything? Yeah, I get the economy, but if you're going to have a pandemic that's going to take out 2% or more of the world, even the MFers, the Illuminati, the Illuminadonkeys, they might say, hey, man. But it seems to me like then you've got Netflix jumping on the bandwagon. They're like, hey, look, we've got this new TV series out. It's called Pandemic. Check it out. So I'm like, wait a second. What perfect timing. Yeah. Netflix, the big media, everybody's talking about it. So literally, you could show a Bigfoot hanging out with a gray on the White House. They could be getting it on. And guess what? People wouldn't care. They'd be like, whoa, they're doing it. No, I don't care, man. I got to worry about this virus. Come on, dude. Anyway, so
perspective.
Yeah,
it's the other important word, like identity, I said before, and the other key word in kind of making sense out of a lot of things is perspective. And the powers that be want a skewer perspective so that people are divided against themselves and disempowered by their fear. And so people can use this, because actually that's what Nostradamus did in Aix-en-Provence. You got a P put on in whitewash on your door. You couldn't leave your house. The constables and the police would say, well, you know, you can get food brought to your door and stuff. But they just knew that if there was always an edict out, no, don't associate no more than 2 people, on the food markets would be closed. They knew that for some reason when people gathered, that made people sick. So they didn't know why, but they stopped. They're doing many of the things that they're trying to do around Wuhan. And when people understand the number of people that live in China, I think the Chinese are doing an amazing job, especially at Chinese New Year, when all of China's billion people are on the move. This thing timed right at this time. And they've done a pretty good job shutting it down with everybody in transit when it happened. So, and the other thing too, when I'm looking at shots that people are showing of empty streets of Shanghai, I saw today, and I said, that's an alleyway.
And how do you know it's not from, 10 years ago? How do you? And then
it actually looked a bit dated, and it's like, yeah, an alleyway in Shanghai is not going to be teeming with people. An on-ramp alleyway, and they're not like showing the main square. They're not like showing the main centers of where people gather. And like if they showed that little island where all those amazing buildings are, they're all geometrically shown. If they showed those streets absolutely empty, then my next issue would be, okay, is this CGI altered? When did this happen? How do I know this is actually a real picture? It may be. I'm not saying it isn't. I mean, true skeptical inquiry doesn't have a prejudice for or against, but it does question it for love of truth what this is. And so I think the bigger danger from the C virus is what it might do with the fact that China, even though it's trying to diversify itself into being a consumer as well as producing factory nation of the world, still is a major place where things are made for everybody in the world. And given that the issue of time delay, if certain parts don't get to the place where they make the cell phones in America, then that backs up the other parts and the other stages. And what you could have is kind of a traffic jam of waiting that kind of slows down the economy. And that is actually more likely to cause some kind of an economic cool down, that all this quantitative easing that's being pumped into odd places like the repo market and the banks, it's so fragile now. When everybody's talking about how great our economy is, and this is like the big thing that is the argument of President T, is that, we're doing better than we've ever done before. Certainly the financial sector is, but the real economy isn't. And what it sounds more and more like to me is that what they're describing as a big and growing economy is a bubble that's getting bigger and bigger. And as it gets thinner, the irradiance of all the rainbows dazzling on its surface get more but it's getting thinner and thinner the bigger the bubble gets. And it takes just a little thing that's not even directly related, like a flu in China, that could make something go pop. So that I'm more concerned about that than this being the pandemic.
Thank you for that. And so give us a couple of predictions for 2020, and then let's get into the final. Who's going to become president?
Okay. So,
and just real quick, I just want to let people know, because we've got 1,200 plus people in the chat. You got to check out HogueProphecy.com. Folks, if you'd like a reading, John does personal readings. He uses astrology. He uses a multitude of techniques, and plus his years of knowledge and research, and plus doing specific I don't know, what do you call them, like readings or sessions or what your particular verbiage is, but he helps people out. He helps people maximize their, like if you want to get some advice about certain things, John can help you with that, right, John?
Yes, and if you go to hogueprophecy.com, right at the very top, it'll say in red there, just a little from the top, it says Hogue readings, and there'll be a link there, Hogue Bulletin at hogueprophecy.com, and just click on that and put Hogue readings in your email, and I will get right back to you, and I will give you information on what the reading entails, how long it is, the price, how to set up the online reading with Zoom, and the current times that are available. And so hopefully, like I was saying earlier, the readings are ways to look at the ways in which society has brought identity in the place of our own innate genius that we were born with, which can never be lost, but it can be buried in a looking out to everything but where it is kind of habit that society makes a lot of us do. And so yeah, I use the astrology to kind of look at that as the prelude, and then I take this, what I prefer, if I would rather call it a happening rather than a reading, but it's amazing what happens, that I then go into a space where sometimes we use the tarot cards as a trigger to go into deep divination, and answer and give points to anything. I mean, I do stuff for personal issues, for businesses, for all kinds of things, for personal transformation, or when people are stuck and need to see if there's, or check something out, see if it's true or not. And this oracular thing that overtakes me, it very effortlessly does these things. And basically I read you with all the love and intention that I read the world with.
Awesome. And John, I'm thinking to myself, could you imagine what it would be like if you were president? How difficult that would be? I mean, my goodness, we've got 1,200 people in the chat, a little bit more than that, and it's so polarized right now. I'm like, I'm listening to you, and I'm like, relax, guys, calm down. Hey, take it easy here, because we've got so many intelligent, amazing people that listen to Leak Project. You know that. You talk to people all the time that watch
amazing.
Project.
Most of my readings come from there, and they're amazing people.
So yeah. So folks, take it easy. If we all thought the same, would be the Borg, and that would really suck. You're not going to plug me into the Borg because my mind is not for rent to any god or government. All right. Who's it going to be, John? Who's it going to be? 2020. Who's winning?
I did a dark horse 13 months before 2016 election. I have another dark horse that I'm watching and finding it very intriguing what's going on. My sense is generally that it's pretty clear. I'll put it this way: just like I said in 2016, the only person who could defeat Hillary was Trump. I said that 13 months before anybody thought he was serious, and everybody thought even NBC, his producers at Apprentice, were thinking he was joking. And I realized, no, he's not. His sons and daughter are ready to run the business. That's why he didn't do it last cycle, because I actually listened to him. He said that. He said, I wasn't sure my sons and my daughter were mature enough to run the Trump industry. Now they are. And when I look at his intensely close connection to his family, which rarely gets talked about, how in his astrology, it's very private and it's very deep. He's very close to his family. And so that was an important trigger that gave me the insight to go, oh my God, he really, this is it. And, it makes sense because he's going to be turning 70 when he started. when he made his announcement on his birthday, he turned 70, and he's 14th of June, 2015. He was 69. He was going to be 70 when he was going to be president. So this was the time to go all the way to 78 if he did 2 terms. So, and I also been reading him all these years with some weird thing that thought, wow, this guy has some destiny, and I don't know why my oracular instincts make me even consider this person, because it doesn't, a lot of times I don't agree with what I'm looking at. And there's a similar thing that started in 2008 with the man that I think might be the dark horse for this presidential cycle in 2020. I started writing about him back then, and he was also a billionaire, and he's also from New York, but with something very interesting. He has astrology that's very similar to another New York man who became one of the greatest presidents in a very dire time, the last time we were in the 4th turning of the Depression and a potential world war, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The man that I'm talking about, and I'm already seeing, as much as the mainstream is trying to poo-poo it, his Michael Bloomberg's campaign to use the media, since that's where he made his $60 billion. I'm kind of noticing as these ads are coming on, I'm going, wow, this guy has a way of he's going to kind of he's everywhere. He's like viral. It's like he's on the corner of pages now. And he's going to put another $200 million. So he will have spent $400 million before Super Tuesday. And his strategy is to hit that big thing with Texas and California. And really, he doesn't get a lot of attention, but he's already speaking. Today he was in Michigan. He's been doing speeches in all the battle states since this started in November with him. He doesn't get, as I figured, he doesn't get any attention like all the free advertising President Trump got. So in his campaign, so he's going to have to pay. I think he'll spend 10 billion of his 60 billion to pay for the kind of exposure that Trump got free in 2016 election from just being a ratings magnet. Now Bloomberg is not a ratings magnet. He's as I said in your show before, he's as exciting as chopped liver. But and again, just like with Trump, had a lot of huge hurdles to get over, and I wasn't at all certain he would succeed. But if I predict that if Bloomberg is a close second by April Fool's Day, just like I said back in 4 years ago, I said if Trump is in the lead by April Fool's, 1st of April, he'll never look back. And that's all documented in Hogue Prophecy, all the steps, because I did articles in every step that he had to cross through, and then he made it. So the other thing too is that in prophecy, the art of doing forecasting is not to just look at what is the extrapolated possibility of the big data you have before you. You have to have a sense for the surprises that the big data doesn't see coming. And so that means an intuitive gift. I predict that by the time, sooner than later for Bloomberg, if the economy gets a little bad or looking ominous, at least, it's really not going to crash till next year, but enough to make people look at it. There's 2 things that Bloomberg must not do. He must not try to placate all the extreme people on the left by doing the thing that destroys everybody who goes against Trump because of Trump's ability to be a perfect mirror. He reflects back any negativity right back on the person. And this is the big step that Bloomberg must not do. And he seems to know that he shouldn't do it, although Trump is already calling him Little Mike and talking. He made a joke about he's going to probably need a box to stand on, so that, and then of course Trump is 6'3". But if he's got to watch his Napoleon complex, Mr. Bloomberg, because if he goes negative like all the other candidates have done, Trump is a shoo-in to win a second term. And I strongly lean towards that anyway. I have actually before he was elected in the first term by looking at his astrology. But if there's one person that can beat him, it's no one on the left. It's not Bernie Sanders, because the same thing that could have happened to Sanders last time up front with the superdelegates is waiting in the wings in the convention in July in Wisconsin, where the superdelegates, even more numerous than before, overseen by a committee that will oversee them, which are all elite mainstream Democrats. What will have to happen is that, even if Bernie Sanders will have to have a landslide to win. And I don't think that's going to happen. The other thing too is that polarity fatigue is beginning, I sense, to grow. And by the latter half of the primaries, it may very well be that people want stability. And if Bloomberg can say, look, I'm the adult in the room, all this other stuff about is nice, but I've really got the experience and the chops to make things happen. And he has, whether you look at his record and like or dislike it, the man did a lot of things that shows that he's not just talking about it. It's not just some dream. He's a guy that's been a major success in business, a major success in politics and philanthropy, and also political action with his money. And so the real question is the American people, are the American people ready to stop the polarizing and the gotchas and the identity politics and all of that, and just look at, is stability actually more important than all of that?
Let me ask a question real quick before I forget, because this is something that was presented to me by my friend, another friend I have, John D'Souza, and he's a retired FBI investigator, 25 years, and he gave me a prediction about who he thinks is going to run. It's just going to be a wild card, but he brought up Bloomberg and being kind of setting the stage possibly for Michelle Obama. What do you think about that?
Michelle Obama, yeah. Michelle Obama, I think, has as much possibility of becoming president as Oprah Winfrey with the same things. It really sounds like a great idea, but she has no experience, and she has made no. I know that Obama, her husband, may step in and try to push and make them, and it could very well happen if she has at all a chance. It would happen. I really think it's a high chance of a brokered convention for the Democrats, and the second ballot could literally even see Hillary Clinton elected as the nominee. The question is, will Bloomberg doesn't have a lot of time to convince the elites that they really got to go with this guy because he can beat Trump. That's his argument. He's got to make it. What's against him is that the economy's not probably really going to go bad until after the elections in a way that everybody goes, ouch. So, it's just a lot like 2007 right now, where sectors are getting hurt, but the real boom didn't lower until September of 2008. And we're in a 2-year cycle of the beginning of it, where people, it's here, oh, maybe not, oh, maybe it's just a correction, and then it hits. And that hit is happening maybe a few weeks after the election into early 2021. So in a way, what is Trump's ability to win is to keep this positive hyperbole, as he would call it in his own Art of the Deal, going, and he did a great job tonight kind of listing all of his accomplishments. Now, again, I step back and I say, I'm not saying these are good accomplishments or bad, but I can, from this neutral observation, tell you that there hasn't been a president since Lyndon Baines Johnson in the 60s who has gotten more of his agenda through to law and changes than Donald Trump. He's phenomenal that way, and he listed them. And you know, it was a good speech. It was like he was now this, I'm saying this beyond whether I agree or disagree with what he's doing, but I have to acknowledge that he has significantly done a lot on his laundry list of things to do. And then he laid out where he's going to try to do the infrastructure in his second term that he didn't do in his first. I mean, he's successfully a significant 160 new major judges have been put into the judicial tier of the constitutional three-tiered thing, as well as 2 Supreme Court justices, which literally dictates how the Constitution will be interpreted for a generation. So on that alone, he's deregulated. He has come through with his promise. He changed NAFTA just now. Canada's still waiting, but they will vote for it, to ratify it. You know, he's got stage 1 of his China thing going on. And beyond whether there's really a lot of there's enough there for him, the salesman genius that he is, to play them positively. And it was to the point where poor Nancy Pelosi in the back was just she kept looking at the speech and moving the pages around, looking at the speech, and it was rather distracting and looking and then at the end, she took the speech and ripped it up. He didn't even see it. He's shaking hands with people, and she's behind him on the podium, ripping the speech. I couldn't believe it. That's never happened in American history. And I'm just thinking, in that one gesture in the speech, that Trump just being truly saying this is what he's done, and this is what he's going to keep doing. And it was just, and her gesture to rip up the speech is exactly the reason why he'll be a second-term president, unless that stops. You know, because this looked bad. Optics in politics. It's all, if you're going to see it, it's going to be viral. You're going to see it's already happening, where what's taken home from that is 2 things that in optics of politics is very important. We still don't know who won in Iowa, because the whole thing was a snafu with the counting and what they did. So the whole kind of getting your momentum in the first thing that happens in the season, all the poor candidates had to pretend they won and go off to New Hampshire. So it was a real buzzkill. And then this happens and then she's ripping things, which just doesn't look very adult. And then tomorrow it's the impeachment thing, which probably where the final vote will be given. And I imagine there might even be some Democrats that will vote against impeachment, not because I know one of them would like to censure him, but it's not because the senator from West Virginia, but it's not because they like what he's done, but to bring abuse of power, which is such a vague and subjective thing, to the Senate. I think a lot of senators will say, look, next time come with a really solid case that has bipartisan support, like what was being developed against Nixon. The reason why Nixon didn't let it go to an impeachment trial is because he was smart enough to see that they got him red-handed. So he was already when he was already preparing for his successor when he made Senator Ford, his vice president after the other guy was in a scandal. He was already preparing for it. So it didn't have to go to impeachment trial because it was a solid case with a crime. There is no clear crime in this case. And if people want to use abuse of power, which is not in the Constitution, then you will then have in future, every president will be impeached. It'll be worse than the Ukrainian parliament, which is pretty bad. You want to see a good Saturday night fight, just watch the news feeds of the Ukrainian parliament. They're having Donnybrooks. Same in Taiwan. That's also a lot of fun. Or the Knesset. They don't actually go to blows, but a lot of shouting in the Knesset, and I sometimes watch this. So yes, I think Bloomberg is the only man who can beat Trump. Now, the other thing that's looming astrologically is Hillary Clinton really wants to repeat 2016 and 2020. I don't think if she's coming in, she's got to come in soon. Otherwise, but I'm thinking that she's waiting to be invited in by the superdelegates. And I think she might be already working on them. So it might ultimately be a battle between, in a second ballot, in the second or third day of the Democratic convention would be, who are the superdelegates that understand that repeating 2016 may not be a good idea, and maybe Bloomberg is the guy. And so it'll be a behind closed door Donnybrook. It's something we haven't seen since 1968 Democratic convention.
It's going to be a bumpy ride. I'm certainly looking forward to seeing what's going to play out. To me, the whole world's a stage.
Yeah.
And
we are but the players.
Well, you know, that's right. We're the players. And I'm not going to get into the battles that the gods are getting into, or the MFers, because it seems like at the very top levels, there's got to be some influence that maybe isn't human. So maybe these top people at the highest levels, especially if you read the Sumerian King list. And folks, I want to let you know, I'm putting together a brilliant presentation for LeetCon that's going to be April 3rd and 4th at the Gaiasphere, Boulder, Colorado. Brian Forrester is going to be there, Adrian D'Amico, Diamond from Oppenheimer Ranch, as well as Leah Shaper. And this presentation I've got goes all the way back to the beginning of the Sumerian King list, which is 281,000 years ago, where it specifically states the kingship descended from the heavens. And if you look at these connections with aristocrats around the world, it seems to me like there's a very close fit there. So are the new bosses the same as the old bosses? And these are cyclical events that seem to take place. I'm under that impression with the information that I've got compiled for this presentation, folks. Hopefully you can be there. Seats are limited. So click the link in the video description box and get your tickets today. But John, it seems to me like this whole system at some point is, how do I put it, controlled. It's controlled narratives. It's controlled information. It's controlled technology. It's controlled energy. The poles of picks seem to be controlled. And it's going to be a bumpy ride. I do also feel that by 2032, this is a prediction I'm going to make, folks. This is a Rex Bear prediction. By 2032, the president, I don't know if she's going to win, but she's going to run. Sophia, the intelligence that was created that got citizenship in Saudi Arabia, and she connects herself as a female, she said, but she's a robot. Has she got sentient? Has she reached sentience yet? I don't know. I don't know if she's reached sentience yet, but she did get citizenship in Saudi Arabia, and she does seem to have more rights than women do in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
So 2032, she's running. Will she win? Maybe. What do you think about that, John?
Well, there's a theme about the 2020s because you were talking about all the issues of control. This is another, it's funny, even though we've gone in some big issues and I've ranted and raved for a while on them. We talked about identity, we talked about perspective, but I would finish with the 2020s is a whole new evolution where control is trying to control because it's losing control. Central control was crystallized in the last 2,000 years of the Piscean Age, where the whole mindset of a few of us control the rest of you, and with religion, with ideas, with media, with economy, is an attempt that actually this is the last year where astrology sports it. That's why I told my readers, because this 2020 election is happening in the final powerful year of Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto all being in Earth signs together, which is very corporately friendly, control from above friendly, then your choice is only between two oligarchs, President Trump and Bloomberg. So the question is, which of the oligarchs do you feel has a better vision for the country? But there's all the other folks in the crowds around them. They're just, I'm sorry, socialism is just not going to happen. And I like Bernie very much, but it's not going to happen. The country will not go there. They may go there in the next presidential cycle, but not in this one. 2024, perhaps. Because things really shift as we move into the Aquarian age. So the thing that's really going to happen in this crisis but transformatory decade of the 2020s is that what is rising to threaten control is personal responsibility, personal sovereignty, which is the classic core of the coming 2,000 years of the Aquarian age, is the force that each individual possesses. And so just think of that when you think of Bitcoin and other things, or even Elon Musk's battery that you put in the side of your wall, the concept that you don't have to be on the grid. You have your own power. You have your own person-to-person transaction possibilities. I mean, a lot of the transformations of the human race have come from commerce, buying and selling, and then it changes the whole gestalt.
First the military, though. First the military. DARPA oftentimes picks this stuff up, and then it gets corporatized, and then,
But the problem is, certainly of these things can't be controlled. That's the thing that makes Bitcoin or encrypted currencies and things very interesting as an evolutionary mutation that can't be turned into something more like the past. There are things, and there's as simple and as mundane as Bitcoin, or the concept of it, is the first emergences of the real Aquarian age, which is about transcending centralized power, decentralization, where the central sovereign unit of life on the planet is the individual, the undividual, the non-divided human being, in association and relationship with all other uniquely individual beings. And that means, to come back to with that passionate passage that you talked about beings of light, and then all these different identities and struggles and fighting, that is the control issue that will all start disappearing. Nations will disappear, these collective abstracts of control, the nation, the humanity, that will all start slowly. What we're involved in starting in the 2020s is the evolutionary journey into, and it may take 150 more years to complete, but when we're truly into the main part of the Aquarian age, is personal responsibility and sovereignty being the central understanding of this future civilization. Oh, I can't hear you. Yeah, your mic is off.
I know, man. I was trying to talk, and then the screen got full screen, and I'm trying to click it off.
Okay.
I'm like, gosh, dang it.
Yeah.
Crypto, thank you for the super chat. Wow. Hello. That's what I'm talking about. You said something that really made me excited, because right now I love so Bitcoin, I have a position in Bitcoin. I have some Litecoin, I have some Ethereum, I have some Stellar coins. And when I first heard about Bitcoin, it freaked me out, dude. I thought, man, it's the mark of the beast. It's how they're trying to digitalize the dollar. And then the more I learned about it, I was like, wait a second, this is the opposite. It's actually decentralizing the system, so there isn't one specific location that can make all the decisions, right? You don't have this round table of people. They're saying, let's do this, let's change that. And no, it's decentralized. So the more I learned about it, the more fascinated I got, the more fascinated I became. And when you said the decentralized thing, that just really, if the banking system changes, man, like if it goes into, like, you don't need to go into a bank to hold your money. You don't need to pay them to keep money for you that then they can fractionalize. So you give them $1,000 and they fractionalize that, or 100,000 or whatever, right? And then people get mad at those that mention Bitcoin. It's because they're uninformed. Folks, I was that guy. I was the guy doing, but here's one thing that's fascinating. Yes, I get it. If the power goes out, if there's a solar flare, you can't get your money, go to the bank and try and get cash if there's a solar flare. And then also, if you got cash and there's a solar flare, I mean, how long would it take for civilization to rebuild, right? So would your cash money, would your dollar bills be worth anything? And then if you look at the FED reserve, they really love you folks. I mean, talk about a holy, lovely, very mighty, you know, full of morals and values. Oh, yeah. I mean, come on now. You're like, oh, no, man, you're the mark of the beast. Take it easy. Now, with that being said, there are people that have a lot of power that want to digitalize the dollar. Now, if you have a dollar that's digitalized and there's nothing to offset that, it's a global currency that's then centralized, then Houston, in my opinion, you've got a problem because the people that are controlling that centralization. However, if you've got something that's decentralized, that has value, and that people are using with the technologies available, and if you can be prosperous with that, and if you can use that as a tool, why in the heck wouldn't you use it? If anything, that might actually be the offsetting factor to a digital dollar that is completely centralized, something that is decentralized, in my opinion.
Well, that's in fact, and I tell people is that the time's getting full of trouble and crisis are actually going to speed exactly that. When negative interest rates start kicking in to the level of even 25% maybe by 2022, when the central controllers are desperate to hold on, they will be more tyrannical. And that will, I mean, if King George had just kind of looked the other way and not asked his colonists in the American colonies of Britain to pay all the burden of debt for the French Indian Wars, if he just kind of wrote that off and rather than tax and tyrannize them, he lost the jewel of the empire doing that. And in the same way, when people are seeing that if digitalizing money takes with no other possibility, no alternative, is absolutely controlling everybody because they can digitalize it and know exactly when you used it, where you used it, and do this kind of virtue signaling that's happening in China now, where if you spit on the street and a picture sees it, or if you buy something that the government doesn't want you to buy, then suddenly you go to get on the train and you can't get on a ticket. You can't fly because you've been monitored to be an antisocial person. This is very Orwellian, and it's already happening in China. And it will soon happen here, especially if you don't have an alternative currency. So if they try to make paper money worthless, they are only forcing people to take a jump, an evolutionary jump into something that is not the number of the beast, but uncontrolled person-to-person transaction. I mean, that's how it all started. That's how economies began in 8,000 BC or so, at least, maybe farther back, is that people started to create through their capital, their head, bartering and selling and agreeing to a certain value system. It doesn't matter what the value system is. And that has a quality of rarity, which is important. That's why taking interest rates to zero and negative has taken away all investment. There's no time, there's no value of time and interest returned. So, people are just going to play around with the stocks, the people who have all the funny money that's being created. And that's why you've got almost 30,000 points. I could even see 40,000 points before things change. It just went up another 500 today. And it's meaningless. But a transaction that you value between you and someone, and then it can be anywhere in the world. It completely breaks the centralization of everything. Banks, nations. You're now all human beings, individuals on the same planet, instantaneously buying and selling and connecting. That will change everything. And the strange thing is, it will not, when the individual is finally respected, and that means look a deeper way a second time, when people really stand alone in their own sovereignty and their responsibility for their own sovereignty, strangely enough, that, and I've directly experienced this by living in Osho's commune, is that it brings people together. You might actually see in the future more people living communally than you do now. That's one of the weird quirks, one of the unexpected consequences that I deal with as much as I can in my look into the future, the things that you can't extrapolate with big data. So we're in for not only a bumpy ride, but a new journey for humanity.
So give us one amazing prediction in closing. And I got to say, John, this has been awesome. Thank you very much for being a guest on Leak Project.
Thanks for having me. And thanks for your comments and questions in response to the first part. I really welcome those.
Well, good, because I appreciate that. Sometimes I have to hold my words. I have to really bite my tongue and listen to the whole thing before I.
Well, that's very appreciated, because I can tell you, Rex, in all the thousands of shows I do around the world, it is very rare for a host to allow the whole picture to be stated. People think they know where I'm going, and they don't. I had this problem with Art Bell a lot. He thought he knew where I was going, and as the years went by, it just got even worse. And finally, I had to say, no, you've got to. And so I really appreciate doing your show, because you, like Whitley Strieber and others, some of these are complex issues, and sometimes once in a while it's good to see somebody will take the time to paint the whole picture as far as he or she knows it. So a prediction.
Yeah, hello, buckle up.
Yeah, hello, yeah. Golly, we had a list at the beginning that you listed. There were a couple things that you said. I'm trying to remember which one. It's funny. There's so many things.
Well, we talked about the pandemics. We reached on that. We reached on the elections, and then just something that you see from your research. Give us a prediction for this year, something big. And I also predict, this isn't this year, folks, but by 2023, you're going to have phones in your ear or possibly even implanted. So within 3 years, and you'll have the whole world as your canvas, as your monitor. Some people are they're gonna get nervous about it, but they're gonna promote it as being enhanced. They're gonna be like, "Would you like to be enhanced?" And geez, who doesn't want to be enhanced? But then you're like, "Well, you got to plug this directly into your cerebral cortex. Can I still be enhanced?"
Yes. I'm drawing a blank. Maybe it's been a long day.
Well, we've only been talking for 2.5 hours, and geez, I mean, you've probably done several sessions today, and plus you're writing another book.
Yeah.
When's your next book coming out?
My next book is I have 2 books, one on the whole climate issue and another one about the roaring 2020s. And I will have them out this year. I can't be sure when, because now that so many things are happening, my articles, that's the other thing I'm doing. I'm starting to do a thing where if people give a $60 donation to Hogue Prophecy, and you can see how to do it online. For it's like $5 a month. If you put down a donation of $60, I give you 12 months full access to all my articles. That I produce about 115 articles, about 250,000 words, fully illustrated, sourced, and all of that. So it's my website's starting to evolve into a e-magazine in a way, quasi. It still has the free stuff for people to look at, but I'm starting to get some really positive response to that. And so that's another thing to consider. Just you can then check out in detail some of the things I review on this show with other things. But gosh, except for the election, we covered the plague. We I don't think I think I think Nostradamus is spent.
It's funny, John, because somebody just said, it is so funny. We've got 1,200 plus people in the chat, and somebody just said, Rex, you broke John. No, I didn't. It's been a long day for John. And I used my hypnotic powers to get him to have a blank. So come up with something, John. Well. Now, I've got one more prediction, though. This is a prediction I have. I think that they're going to show us an artifact. They're going to show us an artifact, an alien artifact. They're not going to say necessarily a lot of details on it, but they're going to find it either on the moon or on Mars, some type of artifact. That's my prediction for 2020.
Well, I will say this, that kind of triggers an interesting thing that does come up, and it may come this year. It's certainly going to come up in the 2020s. Don't you find it interesting that last year or so they were showing some actual top secret stuff of UFOs flying, and they're really saying, yeah, this is an unidentified flying object that we officially don't know what it is. And then it's not that long after that you get a space wing to the military armed forces. In fact, tonight, there was this little kid who's a great-great-grandson of one of the oldest surviving World War II veterans, who was one of the Tuskegee Airmen, all-black Mustang squadron that fought over Italy in World War II. And they were up in the wings. And it's usual thing now since Reagan started it in his talks to kind of have guests. And so Trump was introducing not only the Tuskegee Airmen, but his great-great-grandson, who's already on a list when he's old enough to be part of the new space military agency. So the fact that the agency is coming, it's an interesting thing. Now, it may be being used to just a new system of control. I mean, remember Arthur C. Clarke made the famous prediction in one of his 2001 series sequels that, the day that everybody understands that there is actually alien life out there, intelligently, potentially alien life, it will solve a lot of the tribal issues in our world overnight. But it doesn't mean we've evolved so much. It's just now we have a common enemy that's off-world. And it often happens when a family's squabbling. If you've got a real threat from another tribe or something like that, everybody drops all that and takes care of that issue. And so, there could be the powers that be may actually in the 2020s find some way to try to control the situation. Or if they actually find something authentic about extraterrestrial life, exploit it to keep everybody, we got to be together now. We all got to march in the same step because it's our civilization against theirs. And so just
like the speech Reagan gave 30 years ago.
Yeah, the Star Wars speech and other things. Yeah, that I think is another element to watch, especially as the 2020s get into the more economic crises and stuff. Some big thing out there. Because remember, one of the most amazing moments of extraterrestrial awareness was during the depths of the Depression when Orson Welles did his War of the Worlds on the Mercury Theater. And people who were watching the top #1 show, when that was over and they switched over to that show, the Mercury Theater, and they didn't hear the opening preamble about all of this being just a play. And if you ever heard the recording of his War of the Worlds show, it's really scary. It's like, my God, Martians are landing in New Jersey, and now they're putting poison gas into New York, and the sound effects and all. It's really great science fiction. What if that Orson Welles did, and it literally caused a panic across the United States because of the economy, because of Hitler, because of all of that, and it was like the first time that had ever happened on a mass scale. So that's the first evidence of how that can be manipulated by powers that be that want to keep their Piscean self-control in a world that is destined to have universal individual sovereignty.
Right on, John. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I will let you go now because, you definitely need to recuperate a little bit after listening. it's kind of, I had an opportunity to speak with Brian Forrester earlier, and he said, once you go to these megalithic sites like Göbekli Tepe, you literally feel drained when you get home. He said, it's just something with the energy. And I can see how that could happen to anybody on Leak Project, especially with 1,200 people in the chat. Just the energy is electric. You can feel it's like the adrenaline's going. But it's a spike of amazing energy, folks. And thanks a lot, John. Really appreciate it. We'll talk again. Everybody, thank you for being here. Hit the subscribe, hit the bell, be well. Hope to see you at LeakCon. It's just a couple of months away, folks. I mean, we're talking Boulder, Colorado, the Gaia Sphere, this gorgeous location. And I also wanted to give you guys a free membership at Gaia. If you want to watch some titles at Gaia TV, click the link in the video description box. It's a free membership. There's over 8,000 titles there. I know how easy it is to get bored with what's on the mainstream. So click that for your free membership. And then go to leakproject.com. I broke the 3,000 podcast mark recently. So wild, 3,000 plus podcasts. We got a forum section there. I did send out some free t-shirts just the other day, so you should be getting those soon for those that won the contest. I'll send out some more as well. And be the change you want to see, everybody. I'm going to go drink some more super tea. I'm just getting started.